Hey, can I give you a piece of advice on buying recreational property? My biggest piece of advice, the biggest principle, and the 4 points that make it up. Buy with the selling in mind. Let me say it again because it's a real important piece of information. I've been giving it to people for almost 2 decades. Buy with the selling in mind. Man, I'm never going to sell that property. I'm buying it and we keep it my whole life. We'll give it to my kids. They're going to give it to their kids. It'll be in our family for generations. Okay, that's a great goal and I commend you for it. Just trust me, I'm 58 years old. It's not my first day on the planet. I've done this a lot of times. Life changes. It changes for me. It's going to change for you. It doesn't make it mean it always changes for the worse. Life changes, and you may very well have to sell a property that you think that you're going to keep for a lifetime. So buy with the selling in mind. So when you're looking at a piece of recreational property, one thing you got to consider is location. Now, we've always heard location, 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 and that's a cliche. But what I mean by that is you'll have better chance of getting rid of a property that you need to get rid of for whatever reason if you're in a decent area that's got a lot of population within a 2 or 3 hour driving window. That's what I mean by location. To buy something extremely remote, you want to be where you can't see anybody and nobody can see you, I understand. But if you ever want to sell a piece of recreational property and you need to get rid of it as quickly as you can for the best price that you can, you need to have good location. And that means you need to make it available to as many people as possible. And that means you got to be around population. 2 to 3 hours of a big population center or centered between two large cities or something like that where people can get to it in a reasonable amount of time. You'll have a better chance of selling that property. Second thing, when you think about buying with the selling in mind, is make sure that property has good access. I mean, it's got to have deeded access. Now, it doesn't have to for you to buy it. It doesn't have to for you to enjoy it. But for you to sell it reasonably quickly and to get a good price for it, if you ever have to do that, you're really going to need a property with good access, because most people are not going to entertain buying a property that they got to figure out how to get to, or they have to worry that somebody's going to put up a gate and lock them out and shut them out, or they can't use a lender to finance. So if you have a property that doesn't have deeded access, meaning it doesn't touch a public road or it doesn't have a legal deeded servitude or easement to it, most people, not all, but most people are going to look somewhere else. They're not going to look at your property, and most lenders are not going to loan money to those buyers for that property. Most lenders must have a legal access to a property before they'll loan money on it. Not all, but most. So that access, though it might not be critical to you for you to use and enjoy the property, it's going to be pretty important when you get ready to sell it, and especially if you need to sell it in a pretty timely manner. Number 3, think about the improvements. When you buy a piece of recreational property, just like I have, you want to go in there and make it your own. That's what you ought to do. But just think through the improvements that you spend your money on in those early years. Make sure it's the kind of improvements that will add value, not just to your liking, but that most people will like and appreciate. You can't go wrong with roads. You can't go wrong with food plots. You can't go wrong with putting up deer stands or duck blinds, having all that in place to make the property a little more turnkey, a little more user-friendly to the next owner, if there happens to need to be a next owner. So go in there and make the kind of improvements that really add long-term value to the property, not just your little personal little things that you kind of like. Let me give you an example. Probably doesn't apply to you, but it's a good example that explains what I'm talking about. I've been dealing with this for years. We sell a lot of high-end recreational tracts, and a lot of them have really nice camps and lodges on them. The mistake a lot of people make when they build those camps and lodges, nothing wrong with building them, but they'll do excessive upgrades. I've seen lodges that were over 7,000 square feet on only 400 acres of property that had Italian marble floors. That's really nice, but that costs a lot of money. And when it comes time to sell that property, just like we had to sell that property for that gentleman, people don't want to pay that extra $50,000 or $75,000 because you put Italian marble on the floors when something from Home Depot would have done just as well. So you can go in and spend a lot of money on a lot of fancy and high-end upgrades to make the property really nice the way you've always wanted it, but you're not always going to get that money back. In fact, most of the time you won't. Just because it costs an extra $50,000 or $75,000 to put that in doesn't mean a new buyer is going to come along and reimburse you. You're out of pocket because he didn't want that. That was your choice, not his. Now it's time to sell the property, and nobody's going to give you that kind of money for it. So do upgrades, do improvements that make a long-term difference, make an impact on the property overall, and that seem to fit with what most people would be interested in. Hey, and the fourth consideration when you're thinking about buying with selling in mind is, of course, the price. To buy a good piece of recreational property doesn't mean you've got to steal it. Doesn't mean you've got to buy it at some unbelievable great bargain or steal price. No, just buying a property at a fair market value for whatever it is where you are at that time in history. There's nothing wrong with that. Buying it at a fair price is going to help you get rid of the property when you have to, if you have to. Because if you have to sell it in a couple of years, if you bought it at a fair market price, you should be able to get that back. Especially if you've made reasonable improvements to the property. You can market it to a lot of people in your region, and it's got access, so it's going to interest more people, and they can get financing for it if they need to. Having a good price on the property is going to help you sell it faster. You might make a little bit of money, but you might not. If you're having to sell it within a couple of years of buying it, you might not make anything. But if you're having to sell a piece of property because of life changing or just unfortunate circumstances, it's okay if you lose a little bit. It's better to get rid of the property and lose just a little money and move on with your life than having gone in at the beginning and paid way too much for it just because you were too anxious, wanted to get on it while you could, and you overpaid, and now it's time to sell it. You're not going to get any more than the market price for it. Be wise with the price. Doesn't have to be a steal, but it's just got to be around market. And understand, if you've got to get rid of it pretty quickly, you might not get every penny back, but losing a few $1,000s is not going to wreck our lives. Losing tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars, that's going to leave a pretty big dent. When you buy a piece of recreational property, which is a luxury purchase, it's something we don't have to have, but we want to have. Buy it with the selling in mind, and hopefully you'll never ever have to sell that property, but if you do, you can. Thanks for watching our videos. There's some more right there. Check them out.